Some armed robbers today invaded a commercial bank in Ise-Ekiti, killing a police officer and carting away unspecified amounts of money. The State Police Public Relations Officer, Caleb Ikechukwu, who confirmed the incident to Channels Television, said that the gang broke the bank's security door with dynamite to gain access. He adds that policemen are on the trail of the robbers as he calls on residents not to entertain fear, but rather support the police with relevant information. US President Donald Trump has described the Democrats' impeachment inquiry against him as a witch hunt and says there should be a way to stop them. The president's comments comes as the whistleblower complained against the president says that the White House tried to lock down details of a phone call between President Trump and his Ukrainian counterparts to investigate his leading political rival, Joe Biden. Here's Simon Pusey with more international news in Around the World in 5.
Newsroom here in London. Jacques Chirac, the former French president who championed the European Union but whose later years were blighted by corruption scandals, has died at the age of 86. Chirac served 2 terms as president, 1 as prime minister, and took France into the single European currency. He was a charismatic figure who dominated French politics for decades and stirred national pride with his opposition to the US-led invasion of Iraq. Chirac, who emerged as a political prodigy in the 1960s, went on to become France's second longest-serving president. However, he had long suffered from neurological problems and was rarely seen in public in recent times.
President Juncker was moved and devastated by the news that Jacques Chirac has passed away. For him, Europe is not only losing a great statement, but the president is losing a dear personal friend.
US administration officials tried to lock down all aspects of US President Donald Trump's phone call to Ukraine's leader. That's according to a whistleblower's report. In the call, Donald Trump pushed Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate corruption claims involving Joe Biden's son. The newly released report says the transcript was not stored in the computer system normally used for such information. Instead, it says it was stored in a separate system used to store classified information of an especially sensitive nature. Mr. Biden, the leading Democratic presidential hopeful, says a rough transcript of the conversation released on Wednesday shows the president betrayed his oath of office. The Speaker of the British House of Commons, John Bercow, has described the atmosphere in the chamber on Wednesday as worse than he's known in his 22 years in the House. It comes a day after the British Prime Minister responded to an emotional request from an opposition MP for him to tone down his rhetoric, with Paula Sherriff referencing her friend Jo Cox, who was killed by a man holding different political views to her in 2016.
And let me tell the Prime Minister that they often quote his words: surrender act, betrayal, traitor, and I, for one, am sick of it. We must moderate our language, and it has to come from the Prime Minister first.
Her demand for the Prime Minister to temper his language to try to protect MPs' safety was met with this response by Boris Johnson.
I have to say, Mr. Speaker, I've never heard such humbug in all my life. Because the reality is...
Jo Cox's sister described this response as unacceptable.
I mean, I think the humble comment was particularly disrespectful. I hope he's had time to think about that and realise that probably wasn't the most helpful thing to do in those circumstances. But, you know, he gets abuse. All politicians get abuse. But the only way we're going to change that culture out in broader society is by them behaving in a responsible manner.
Efforts to prevent an oil spill are underway after a Russian trawler which had been on fire in Tromsø in northern Norway capsized. According to the Coast Guard, there are around 200,000 litres of diesel fuel on board, and measures to limit any oil spill have been initiated. There were no reports of fatalities on board the Bukta Naisdik. Police have not confirmed the cause of the fire. The University Hospital of North Norway closed parts of its operations and several schools in the area, while approximately 100 people in the vicinity of the fire were also evacuated from the scene. US authorities have returned a stolen coffin to Egypt 2 years after it was acquired by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. The 2,100-year-old coffin of a priest called Nejemenak was featured in an exhibit housing artifacts from Egypt. The stolen antique was sold to the museum by a global art trafficking network, which used fraudulent documents. The gilded coffin was looted and smuggled out of Egypt in 2011. Prince Harry has spoken of his love of Botswana on the 4th day of his royal tour of Africa. Harry is visiting the country while Meghan and baby Archie remain in South Africa. He said he feels deeply connected to the country after first visiting it after his mother, Princess Diana, died in 1997.
I have some of my closest friends here over the years, and I came here when I was 97, 98, straight after my mum died. So it was a nice place to get away from it all. But now I feel deeply connected to this place and to Africa.
And finally, a new meaning to the term houseboat. A mansion called Maryland Mansion, which was built in the 1760s, was filmed taking a trip on the water as it was relocated from Easton to Queenstown. Named the Galloway House, the 400-ton home was shipped more than 80 kilometres by barge to its new location. The Baltimore Sun newspaper reported that the owner purchased the home but wanted to relocate it to a waterfront property. The move is estimated to have cost nearly $1 million. And that's your international news around the world in 5.
Brilliant, Simon. If houses could move. Well, it's time now for sports news. Moving on to that one with Neil Taigwe.
Thank you, Given. Welcome to Sports News. The Edo State government wants to use the 2020 National Sports Festival to relaunch the state into a sports hub. This assertion was made by the state's Deputy Governor, Philip Schreiber, who is also the chairman of the local organizing committee, during the launch of various committees ahead of the Edo 2020 National Sports Festival. The chairman of one of the subcommittees, Professor Darlington Obaseki, understands the task ahead and promises that they will work to ensure that they deliver an effective sports festival. And Super Eagles technical advisor Gernot Rohr has named Granada of Spain midfielder Ramon Aziz and Slavia Prague forward Peter Olainka in his 23-man squad for the international friendly against Brazil on October the 13th. Wilfred Ndidi, Kenneth Omeru, Abdullahi Shehu and Chio Dozie Awajem returned to the squad after missing out against Ukraine, while Kelechi Iheanacho, Leon Balogun and Brian Idowu have been left out. Alex Iwobi, Oganekare Tebo, Joseph Ayodele Aribo, Victor Osimhen, Samuel Chukwueze, Moses Simon, Samuel Kalu and Paul Onuachu also made the cut. The team is made up of 3 goalkeepers, 7 defenders, 6 midfielders and 7 forwards. The invited players are expected to arrive in Singapore on Wednesday, October the 9th. And the Spanish Football Federation has fined Barcelona €300 for breaking the rules in their €120 million signing of Antoine Griezmann from Atletico Madrid. Now, some have called that a slap on the wrist. The France forward switched from Atletico to Barca in July after Catalans exercised his release clause, although Atletico complained that negotiations took place when Griezmann was still under contract with them. A statement from the Spanish Federation Competition Committee on Thursday said that Barca was wrong to have started negotiations with Griezmann without Atletico's permission. The player was absolved of any responsibility. And boxing promoter Eddie Hearn says Anthony Joshua can avenge his shock defeat in the second world title fight against Ruiz Jr. on December the 7th. Mr. Hearn believes Joshua will display more agility and athleticism against Andy Ruiz Jr. in their rematch because he's received more time to hone his body for the rematch. AJ had primed himself for a physical encounter against Jarrell Miller, only for the American to fail a drugs test and instead was forced to contend with Ruiz Jr. His team says he has now tailored his training specifically for his Mexican opponent. Both fighters will fly out to Riyadh on the 14 days ahead of the fight to use purpose-built training facilities, and Hearn believes the Mexican champion will bring a similar physique into the rematch. And that's it on Sports News. Gimba will be back with the rest of the news at 10.
And the main news again, a British court today granted Nigeria's request for stay of execution of the $9.6 billion judgment delivered in favor of PNID, with $200 million conditional payment into the court's account. The Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, said that the country's lawyers will consider appealing the payment. Also today, President Muhammadu Buhari and other African leaders attending the United Nations General Assembly in New York have discussed ways to combat illicit financial flows through international cooperation for sustainable development. And that wraps it up on News Track on the News at 10 tonight. I want to thank you so much indeed for watching. On behalf of all of us, have a splendid night. Good night.